This week on Days of Our Lives, Salem is headed for total chaos. One terrifying crisis turns into a desperate race against time, while somewhere else, a secret so dangerous it could change everything is creeping closer to the surface. So the real question is this: is Salem about to witness a rescue, a miracle, or a lie so devastating it destroys everything in its path? One of the most revealing moments in this preview may not be a rescue scene or a lab shocker at all. It may be Kat looking EJ straight in the eye and asking the question that nobody can ignore. Did he have anything to do with Stephanie's kidnapping? And honestly, that confrontation matters for more than just the answer. Because in Salem, suspicion does not come out of nowhere. When someone like Kat immediately looks at EJ as a possible mastermind, that tells us exactly how poisoned his reputation has become. EJ has spent years operating in gray areas, making ruthless decisions, hiding behind technical truths, and benefiting from chaos even when he wasn't the one who started it. So now, whether he is guilty or not almost becomes secondary. The real issue is that he has created a version of himself that nobody fully trusts anymore. That is why this accusation lands so hard. Kat is not just panicking. She is following a pattern. Stephanie is missing. The situation feels calculated. Owen has a dark history in this orbit, and EJ's name is once again floating near the center of something disturbing. In another town, maybe a denial would calm people down. But this is EJ Demera. A denial from EJ never clears the air. It usually makes viewers wonder what exact wording he is choosing, what detail he is leaving out, and what part of the truth he may be carefully reshaping. And that is where the scene becomes so compelling from a storytelling standpoint. Because EJ may very well say he is not responsible this time. But even that kind of response has its own tension built into it. Not responsible can mean many things in Salem. It can mean he didn't order it. It can mean he didn't plan the whole thing. It can mean he found out later and chose not to stop it. Or it can mean he is telling the truth on the surface while still protecting someone, covering for a larger scheme, or refusing to reveal what he knows. That's why Kat pressing him is so important. She is forcing the audience to look at EJ the same way Salem now does. Not as a man whose words can be trusted at face value, but as a man whose every sentence must be examined. And that creates a much richer layer of suspense. Because once a character loses the benefit of the doubt, every denial feels like a performance until proven otherwise. So even if EJ did not directly orchestrate Stephanie's kidnapping, this preview makes one thing very clear. He is still tied to the same ecosystem of manipulation, buried secrets, and moral rot that allowed something like this to happen in the first place. And that may be the most dangerous clue of all. Because Kat's accusation doesn't feel like the end of a question. It feels like the opening move in something much bigger. While Kat's confrontation with EJ adds psychological tension, the rescue story is where the week starts gaining real momentum. And the key turning point comes when Kayla reaches out to Kat for help. That detail may sound simple on the surface, but it actually changes the entire shape of the storyline. Up until now, Kat has largely existed on the emotional edge of this crisis, worried, reactive, and desperate for answers. But the moment she provides the code to the secret lab, she stops being just another frightened observer. She becomes part of the mechanism that could finally break this nightmare open. And in a story like this, that matters. Because rescue plots only become truly satisfying when the characters closest to the victim start contributing in meaningful ways. Kat is no longer just emotionally invested in Stephanie's survival. She is actively helping create the path that may lead to Stephanie being found. That gives the story more urgency and makes the rescue feel earned instead of convenient. Once that code is in play, Alex and Rafe move in, and that is when the preview starts building real suspense. They discover the hidden section of the lab, and then they split up, which is exactly the kind of move that soap operas love when they want to maximize danger. From a logical standpoint, splitting up is risky. From a dramatic standpoint, it is perfect. It lets the show run two different suspense tracks at the same time, with each man walking straight into a different kind of threat. Rafe heads toward the glowing pod, which immediately pushes him into the deeper mystery of the week. That path is no longer just about saving Stephanie. It is about discovering what EJ is hiding, what this lab is really for, and why the secrecy surrounding it feels so emotionally explosive. The glowing pod is not just a visual shocker. It symbolizes the larger secret looming over Salem, the one that could hit multiple families at once. Alex, meanwhile, goes in the opposite direction, straight toward the most immediate danger. He heads to the storeroom where Stephanie is being held with Jeremy, and that gives the storyline its human center. Because while Rafe is on the verge of finding a mystery, Alex is on the verge of finding a hostage situation that could turn violent with almost no warning. That split is what makes the rescue plot so effective. On one side, the show is feeding us mystery, secrecy, and looming revelation. On the other, it is giving us claustrophobic, immediate danger. Can Stephanie hold on long enough? What state is Jeremy in? Is Owen still controlling more of this than anyone realizes? And will Alex get there in time, or just in time to make things worse? That's why this structure works so well. The week is no longer telling one suspense story. It is telling two at once. One is about whether Stephanie can physically be rescued. The other is about whether the rescue mission is about to uncover a secret far bigger than anyone expected. And once those two tracks collide, the fallout could become much larger than a kidnapping case. Now let's talk about Stephanie, because one of the smartest choices in this preview is that the show refuses to make her passive. She does not sit there helplessly waiting for rescue. She adapts. She thinks. She takes a risk. Stephanie gets her hands out of the restraints, steals a phone from Owen's bag, and attempts to call for help. And that single sequence may be one of the most important pieces of the entire kidnapping storyline. Why? Because it changes her role completely. Stephanie is no longer just the person others are trying to save. She becomes an active force inside her own survival story. And that makes everything more intense. When a kidnapped character starts fighting back, the story immediately becomes more suspenseful because now there are two races happening at once. The rescuers are racing to find her, but Stephanie is racing too. Racing against time, against discovery, and against the fragile window she has created for herself. That makes every second matter more. And it also tells us something important about Stephanie as a character. This preview is emphasizing intelligence over panic. She is not lashing out blindly. She is looking for opportunity. She is reading the environment. She is using the smallest opening she can find and turning it into a lifeline. That makes her feel more capable, more layered, and frankly, more compelling to watch. But of course, that is also what makes the danger worse. Because the moment Stephanie starts taking control, the cost of failure becomes much higher. If Owen catches her with the phone, his response could be immediate and brutal. If Jeremy is already unraveling emotionally, then Stephanie's attempt to escape may push him into a more desperate or erratic state. And in a closed environment like this, desperation is combustible. It only takes one wrong glance, one dropped phone, one sound at the wrong moment for the entire situation to explode. That is why Stephanie's bravery is so powerful here. It is not safe bravery. It is calculated desperation. She is making the kind of choice people make when they understand that waiting quietly may no longer be enough. And that creates one of the strongest emotional dynamics in the entire preview, because viewers are not just rooting for her to be found. They are watching her actively fight to reclaim control before the men holding her can regain theirs. And that shifts the energy of the story in a big way. Instead of being portrayed as a helpless victim trapped inside somebody else's plot, Stephanie becomes one of the engines driving the tension forward. Her actions may help guide the rescue. Her phone call may become the missing link. Her escape attempt may buy time, or it may trigger the most dangerous phase of the entire ordeal. Either way, she is no longer just enduring the story. She is shaping it, and in a week full of manipulation, hidden agendas, and dangerous men trying to stay in control, Stephanie refusing to stay powerless may be one of the most satisfying elements of all. Now let's move to the part of the preview that could make this rescue storyline even more volatile: Jeremy's meltdown. Because what we're seeing from Jeremy is not calm control. It's not confidence. It's not the behavior of someone who still believes this plan is stable. Jeremy looks frustrated, cornered, and emotionally overwhelmed, and in soap storytelling, that kind of unraveling is never just background noise. It usually signals that the situation is entering its most dangerous phase. Why? Because when a character like Jeremy starts losing emotional control, the threat becomes harder to predict. A desperate person is often more dangerous than a powerful one, because desperation leads to impulsive decisions, reckless reactions, and mistakes that can hurt everyone in the room. Jeremy no longer looks like someone managing a scheme. He looks like someone trapped inside a plan that is starting to collapse around him. And that is a huge red flag. It suggests that whatever control the kidnappers thought they had may already be slipping. Stephanie is resisting. Help is getting closer. The lab is being infiltrated. And Jeremy may be the first person to feel that pressure breaking him. That means his emotional instability could become a trigger point, the thing that turns a tense hostage situation into an all-out disaster. But here's where the preview becomes even more interesting. As unstable as Jeremy appears, Owen still feels like the more serious threat. That distinction matters. Jeremy comes across as reactive. He looks like someone driven by panic, frustration, and emotional pressure. Owen, by contrast, feels colder, more deliberate, more strategic. Jeremy may be the one visibly unraveling, but Owen is the one who still seems capable of making calculated moves while everyone else is distracted by the chaos. And that makes him more dangerous. Because in situations like this, the loudest person is not always the one viewers should fear the most. Sometimes the bigger threat is the person who stays quiet long enough to adjust the plan. The person who sees the collapse coming and immediately starts thinking 3 moves ahead. Owen gives off exactly that energy. That's why Alex punching Jeremy may not be the victory it first appears to be. On the surface, it absolutely plays like a satisfying turning point. Alex reaches the storeroom, there's a confrontation, and Jeremy gets decked. That gives viewers the emotional payoff they want. It's the kind of moment that says the rescue has finally arrived, that the captors are losing control, and that Stephanie may be seconds away from freedom. But the preview carefully avoids making that moment feel final. Instead, it leaves room for the much more unsettling possibility that Jeremy was only one layer of the problem. If Owen still has more tricks up his sleeve, then Alex taking Jeremy down may actually create a more dangerous opening. The obvious threat gets hit, the heroes focus on the immediate fight, and meanwhile the more calculating villain prepares the next move from the shadows. That's what makes this so suspenseful. Because the punch may not end the conflict, it may trigger the next stage of it. And if Owen realizes the situation is slipping beyond repair, he may stop thinking about control and start thinking about damage. Escape, retaliation, desperation, leverage. In a cornered state, a character like Owen could become even more ruthless, especially if he feels like he has nothing left to lose. So while Jeremy's breakdown adds visible chaos, Owen's presence keeps the story psychologically dangerous. One man is falling apart. The other may still be planning. And that combination is exactly what can turn a rescue into something far messier than anyone expected. Because by the time Alex lands that punch, the story may not be nearing its end at all. It may be entering its most explosive chapter. As intense as the kidnapping story is, the most psychologically ruthless material in this preview may belong to EJ and Paulina. Because EJ is not just defending his lab. He is not just arguing for more time. He is not just asking Paulina to stay out of his business. He is doing something much more manipulative than that. He is cornering her with a moral trap designed to make her feel that doing the right thing could destroy lives. And that is exactly what makes this storyline so chilling. When Paulina appears ready to interfere with EJ's operation, whether because of the lab itself, the shady research, the massive power usage, or simply the fact that none of this feels remotely safe, EJ responds by reframing the entire situation in the most emotionally devastating way possible. He tells her, in essence, that if she shuts this down, Abe could lose the chance to reunite with the woman he thought he lost forever. Theo could be robbed of seeing his mother again. And if that happens, Paulina may be the one left carrying the blame. That is not persuasion. That is emotional blackmail. EJ is not appealing to reason. He is not offering transparency. He is not saying, "Trust me because I have proof." Instead, he is weaponizing grief, memory, and longing. He is taking the most vulnerable emotions in this entire story: love for Lexi, pain over what was lost, hope for something impossible, and turning them into a shield for himself. That is classic EJ. Because EJ understands something very important: facts do not always win in Salem. Emotion does. Narrative does. The person who defines the story first often controls how everyone else is judged. And EJ is trying to define this story in the most brutal way possible. He wants Paulina to see only two options. Either she allows his secretive, ethically questionable lab to continue, or she becomes the woman who destroyed a miracle. That is the trap. And what makes it even more effective is that it targets Paulina personally, not just politically. This is not a generic threat. This is not about public scandal alone. This is about forcing Paulina into an emotional crisis where every option feels cruel. If she acts against EJ, she may fear hurting Abe. If she stays silent, she may be allowing something deeply wrong to continue unchecked. That kind of dilemma is what makes soap conflict powerful. Because Paulina is not being asked to choose between good and evil. She is being forced to choose between two kinds of guilt. And if Lexi truly is connected to whatever miracle EJ claims is happening in that lab, then the stakes become even more devastating. Because now Paulina is not just weighing legal questions or civic responsibility. She is weighing hope itself. The kind of hope that can make smart people hesitate. The kind of hope that can make even suspicious people pause and wonder, what if this is real? That is exactly where EJ becomes most dangerous. Not when he is lying openly. Not when he is acting like a villain in plain sight. But when he wraps manipulation in something that sounds almost beautiful. A miracle, a reunion, a second chance. Those are powerful words. And EJ is using them to make Paulina question her instincts. So the real battle here is bigger than whether the lab stays open for another day. This is about control of the emotional narrative. EJ wants Paulina to believe that stopping him would not look brave or responsible. It would look cold, heartless, and unforgivable. And if he succeeds in making her believe that, then he wins long before the truth is even fully exposed. Because he does not just protect the lab. He protects himself by making someone else afraid to become the villain in his story. So as we head into the week of March 9th, Days of Our Lives is building toward two very different explosions at the same time. On one side, we have the immediate physical danger surrounding Stephanie, Jeremy, Owen, Alex, and Rafe. A storyline driven by panic, rescue, confrontation, and the terrifying possibility that the situation could spiral just as help arrives. On the other side, We have something quieter, but in many ways even more dangerous. EJ's emotional war against Paulina, where the weapon is not violence, it's hope. And that may be the connection between both of this week's biggest stories. Because in Salem, danger does not always come from the obvious villain in the room. Sometimes it comes from the promise that sounds too important to reject. Sometimes it comes from the person who knows exactly which fear to exploit. And sometimes the most destructive lie is the one that feels closest to a miracle. So now the week leaves us with two huge questions. Will Alex and Rafe reach Stephanie before Owen makes one final move that turns this rescue into a disaster? And is EJ truly protecting something miraculous for Abe and Theo? Or is he using the pain of that family to manipulate Paulina into silence? That's what makes this week feel so strong. Because the most shocking twist may not be the kidnapping. It may not even be what's inside the lab. It may be the moment Salem realizes that the real battle is over, who gets blamed when the truth finally comes out.